Okay, and away we go. As you can see from the subject of today, we are going to be looking at the light field, and in looking at the light field again, to put that in its proper perspective, the light field represents the neutrino programming that we receive, and the neutrino programming that we receive that moves through the consciousness crystals, the personality consciousness crystals, the bundles that surround us. In other words, this is the yang programming instrument, if you will. And, in looking at the construct, we have seen that, each and every one of these circuits, because they are circuits, despite the fact that we give them a different name, we don't call it the light circuit, but these are circuits. To see that these circuits are at least in numbers, mathematically equivalent. In other words, they're all made up of five gates. And they have to understand how different these gates function. And let's begin with an understanding about the difference in the programming itself. You have the personality that is being programmed by the sun. You have the design that is being programmed by the moon. And they have a very different quality that is running there in the nature of the imprint. And the other thing is that you can't really understand these without the lines. In other words, if we're going to have or discover any analytical value in this knowledge, that it is a combination between what is in fact the general gate archetype, but specifically it is the lines. And the lines are very important. As a matter of fact, if I ever get a chance in my career to go deeper and deeper into this process, one of the most fascinating areas of dream analysis is to understand the shifting that can take place in the way in which the dreamer is motivated and determined during sleep. In other words, the impact on what is, or the byproduct of what is tone and color. But, I don't want to confuse these matters anymore. I just want you to recognize that, we're on the surface here. And it's very important that when it comes to analysis, that there has to be a real integration, linear integration, if you will, of the information. So before I go into any analysis or discussion of these 5 different aspects of the light field, the first thing is to establish an understanding of, the basic line structure. Because, the lines themselves are so incredible. When I first arrived in Ibiza, had no esoteric, mystical, blah, blah, blah. I had none of that in my background. I certainly didn't know anything about, particularly the I Ching. That was incredibly new to me and startling. But all these years of my work, my deepest love is for the structure itself. Lines. If you can understand lines, you really get to understand everything. In a way, by understanding the lines, you can grasp the color and the tones. These archetypes of numbers, archetypes of quality of frequency, continuity in frequency, the one of a tone, the one of a color, the one of a line, they have a relationship to each other. There is a continuity in all of that. When I first began to release the work, when people would get absorbed in the Rave I Ching, we can go mad in the Rave I Ching. The Rave I Ching is, I don't know, it's, I guess part revelation, part automatic writing, part mystery. It's mostly just poetry. I know from the dilemmas of those that have tried to translate it, because it is, it was never intended. The Rave I Ching never came out as a dictionary or an encyclopedia. It came out as, Yeah, as the byproduct of the deep imprint within myself of the understanding of structure. It all came out of the structure. I've been teaching my students now 20 years. It's like if you understand the lines, you can read any chart, you can understand the thematics. It's all there. But they're not simple things. We see that there are different keynote values for lines in different circuits, in different circumstances. We have keynotes that have different values for when they are sexual, as an example. There's all these, or mystical, there's all these different levels or qualities that are there, inherent in the line itself. And it is here that you really see the transition. Because you see, it's not some kind of abstract that goes to sleep. The sleep state brings out a quality of the lines you already have, and a quality of lines that in fact you only have when you're asleep, the ones that the unconscious moon brings into your life, brings into your sleeping design. In other words, lines have a sleep quality, which is an interesting way of thinking about them. But then again, if you understand the basic genetic coding that we have, that in order for us as an illusionary quantum subjective totality to sleep, that it's got to be there in the code. It has to be. And one of the most beautiful things for me about these lines is not so much what most people get excited about, is that they give some kind of insight into dream patterns, is to recognize that every single hexagram that you look at, every line of every hexagram, which means every one that you have, has an awake value, what you normally attach to that line, and it has a sleeping value. And it's inherent there in the chemistry, in the thing itself. So these are the sleeping values of the lines. They are the same, but they are different. And they are different because a different kind of portal is opening up. That is, that the influence of what is a transitory moon. Do think about that. This retrograde of the moon, this 88 degrees of the moon, what's the moon about? I mean, it's not just simply a symbol of the night, if you know what I mean. And obviously it rules the night as the sun rules the day. It is only correct that we are ruled by the moon in that sense as we sleep, that it sets the dynamic of it. But the moon is very different than the sun in the value in which we can give to it as an interpretation. The sun is 70% of our programming. That's already something. The waking day, the waking day is deeply impacted. The imprint of the sun on the waking, on the being that's awake is 70% of who they are. That is not so for the moon. It isn't. In other words, the thing that is keying the unconscious of the sleeper is not 70% of what they are at all. Again, it is the distorted reflection, if you will, of the sun. But it's sort of different, isn't it? When I began my, when I began my own mystical investigations after all of this happened to me, I was fascinated with the moon. I was fascinated with the moon because the moon had become my ally, in that the moon was my first great teacher after the voice. I mean, it was the moon that showed me what happened to my emotional system when it suddenly became activated. It was the moon that was really a great teacher for me. And I began to explore it. And of course, if you go into Eastern astrology, Hindu Brahmin astrology, the lunar houses, the phases of the moon, the quality of the information, the depth of information that they were into regarding the moon, the importance of the nodes, Ratu and Ketu, these, the whole lunar thing had enormous importance. They were an ancient society built on lunar calendars where the moon was everything. And in looking at all of that and synthesizing it, this growing understanding of the driving force of the moon, there is an intensity that it brings. And it is this intensity that it brings into us from the unconscious. From the unconscious. I mean, the dreamer that dreams, the dreamer that suddenly has this moment of recognition in the dream. They're not connected to their unconscious. You can only be connected to what you have conscious access to. We have this deep lunar drive moving us. Every night, when you go to sleep, you are actually being fueled, pumped up, prepared for the next day. And all of that is being brought to you by the moon. That is the moon calculation, the 88 degrees. Okay, so let's go back to these lines. They have sleeping values. So let's go to number 1. We have our understanding of first lines. That this is a fundamental insecurity that can only be overcome through a solid foundation. And what it leads to is a need for facts, data, truth. It is an imperative to collect the information, investigate it, turn it over introspectively. It's all part of the first line theme. And here you can see the theme is secrets. Secrets. Because this is not the waking seeking of a foundation at all. It's not tied to the strategies of survival in the waking world. It appears to be other dimensionally. And when you have that first line, those secrets. And what are those secrets? Basically, it's data, facts, or truths that in the waking life you did not get. Or it is data, facts, or truth that is being implanted in you so you will see it in the waking life when it emerges. That sense of, I knew this was coming. It's not really a secret, if you know what I mean. But it seems to come out that way. I have a lot of first lines. And I'm not a great rememberer of dreams. But in 1985, I went on a bizarre journey. I won't get into the details. But one of the many stops in that journey was Jerusalem. And I had been in a market where there was a second-hand book stall. And I came across a book about, magic, mysticism, I can't even remember what it was about. What was interesting was that there were birth data and astrological charts for a number of very famous people that were discussed in this book, and one of them was Albert Einstein. And I have this dream. And in this dream, Albert is there, and he's standing in front of a blackboard, and he calls me by my name. He says, "Ra, come over here, I want to show you something." And I realize in the dream that it's Albert Einstein. I mean, it's clear to me. I have this sense of, I know who this is, and this is odd, and. And then I go over, and Albert starts writing things on the blackboard. And I can remember the very beginning of watching that, and then I woke up. And I had a very intense awakening from that experience. It was so real to me. When the sun came up, I can remember I was drinking a cup of coffee and I was staring out into the old Yemenite center of the old town. And all these old ancient walls and stuff. And I had this book in my lap and I opened it up to Albert's astrological chart. And the position in the astrological chart was, it had his Venus and his Mercury. They were exactly where the Venus and Mercury was while I was sleeping. One of these transiting phenomena. It wasn't like I was dealing with Albert, but I had this identical combination impacting my oneness. And there was these secrets being written on the wall. Now think about it in the context of the lines in relationship to the gates. And we have these 5 themes of the light field. Love, love. Love is in the details. It's one of my favorite expression, Love is really in the details. It's what is so deeply expressed here. And it's about recognizing that the secrets of love are revealed details. That dream about the other, that something is said that the other in life might never say. A secret that emerges. See, we have 2 levels that we have to grasp here. One is that we are being programmed and we have no real understanding of what the programming is. I'll explain that. The other level is the way in which we actually experience the byproduct of the programming, because remember, it's a byproduct. You do not remember the dream until you're awake. Think about that. I know it sounds obvious, but think about what that means. When you're asleep, you're a 15-gate matrix. You have no awareness. That is, no mental awareness. You have no capacity to conceptualize. You have no involved memory system. The instant you wake up, the information that has been stored cellularly and chemically through the 15-gate matrix, it then passes through genetic continuity, through the chemistry, it passes to the rest of the body, and suddenly there's a presence of, what we're all so familiar with. A kind of disjointed, often surreal kind of, clip. So the secret of love that you get in that dream, please also recognize that there's something else going on here. There is. We have, this is the programming of personality consciousness. And personality consciousness is the source of mystical love, God's love, universal love, all of those themes. And yet it's so clear that the capacity to love, like the capacity to love yourself, is something that is only derived from the details. Only the details. If you do not understand how you work, if you do not understand the mechanics of your nature, if you do not understand the details, you will never get to self-love. It's not possible. And we also see that these themes that move through the lines, that they represent very different kinds of dramas in our sleeping life. Look at the second line of possession. Possession. These dreams where, something is holding on to you, or something that you are holding on to, or something that you're afraid of losing, and on and on. Possession. Do you see something? Just look. I started off by talking about the moon and the power of the moon to drive us. And what is it driving us to? It's laying the foundation that every moment that we awaken, that there's a part of us that's looking for the secret, that is yearning for something, that is in turmoil and needs to do something, that is obsessed and runs amok, that has its fantasy and its vision. If I change the language here and wrote this language as programming code, computer programming code, this is what is there. You seek out on the surface while you're awake. You look for the foundation, but you're always looking for the secrets. It's why it attracts you. It's why that when you're insecure, you think there's a secret that will solve it. But that is instilled in us while we sleep. Why we sleep. How powerful it is to be programmed to possess, to hold on to not let go. This is the program at work. And what we get is these nice little movies on the surface, while the program is doing its work through us. And then we wake up in the morning and it floods through us like the moment they open a dam, and the chemistry just goes pouring through and the neural transmitters start firing. And all of it fills our waking body. It's quite something to think about. We are programmed for turmoil. Programmed for it. I remember in the 60s, early 60s, Mao Zedong, chairman of the Communist Party of China, he wanted to shake up everything, Turmoil will create a new future. So he instituted turmoil, incredible turmoil. We're programmed. When everything is locked in and reliable, it's a sign that things are dying. Turmoil. And look at the 4. Every sleeping 4 has that obsession. And you can understand it too. After all, think about them. Their waking life is about investing in the right beings and the right things for the opportunity. And to be an opportunist with a weak body that can break down and give up and burn out, what's driving it? It's being programmed while it sleeps. It's obsession. And yes or no, you may see it in a dream, but it's always there. It's always pushing. The 5 is fantasy. It's one of the curses of the 5 is that they attract the delusion of potential expectation. And yet they are driven to embody it. The hope, the dream, the possibility. And of course, when you see it in the context of a dream, you know that you're doing science fiction too. You know, these very, very bizarre, they're often actually very beautiful dreams. You know, fairy tale dreams. And then you have the 6, vision. When you put the 6 in the 20th gate, there's an incredible potential to see what may in fact have yet to be seen, which will in fact emerge. So one of the first steps is to begin to orient yourself to the line values. And yet at the same time, as you explore them in terms of the context of your design and your own dream life, so that you're looking for the way in which the line plays out its drama, understand that basically all you're getting is the very, 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 very tip of the iceberg. The rest of it is the programming drive. And the programming drive relative to obviously what the gate is going to be. All right, so let's take a look here. You know, when we're looking at this, what we're basically looking at is what we would call individuality, and really part of the main individuality circuit. We're talking about what we understand as an awareness stream of something that is deeply mutative. Deeply mutative. And of course, when you're looking at this, you can see that there's 2 things here. One is to make a contribution. You know, to make a contribution. And the other is to be aware in the now. So while being aware in the now, being able to make a contribution that is rooted in detail. And all of that for the potential organizing of life. And all of this on the agenda of the personality. Remember, there's a conflict in our dream life between the light field, the earth plane, the demon realm. They have agendas. I don't mean to anthropomorphize them in the sense that they are true personalities in that sense. But like anything else, you know, they are different from the other circuits and therefore have a very specific way in which they operate and condition us. This is personality conditioning. This is yang conditioning. The 20th gate. You know, the 20th gate is an existential gate. Here it is the gate of sight. Sight. You know, these are dreams in which the visual information is more important than the drama. The visual information is more important than the drama. And if you get caught in the drama, well, you may not get the visual information you need. You know, the drama can be very powerful. I mean, in my dream rave, I have the personality 20th gate, 6th line. I have the personality 57th gate, 5th line. I have the 1st gate personality, 1st line. So, you know, these are elements of my dream experience. The sight is the most interesting for me. I have the combination of sight and vision. You know, there are There are dreams that I have had in which what I get to see has no context to what I grasp. Domains that are deeply unusual. And yet one of the things that I have noticed over a catalog now, I've been here a long time on this plane, is that there are things to see that are more important than the events taking place. And I have benefited from that in a sense, because it's a fascinating process. Once you understand your mechanics, you set up your brain. When it distills the information, when you wake up, it has a preset as a way to integrate it. The more you understand your mechanics, the more you will get coordinated, if I can call it that way, coordinated recognition when you awaken and you ponder it. And of course that sight has many levels to it. To see the secrets, to see the possessor or what needs to be possessed, to see the turmoil, to see the obsession, to see the fantasy, and so forth and so on. It is sight. These are deeply, deeply visual dreams with high REM movement, rapid eye movement, tremendous movement. All kinds of things are being seen. But of course, we know that our ability to reconstruct, because of the way in which it works, that is from the 15 to the 64, that it has to go through the codon transference, and I will eventually show you how that codon transference actually works, so you can have a sense of it, how difficult it is to reconstruct. That's why I have always cautioned people about the danger of, trying to establish value from what they've dreamed. They're only getting really bits and pieces of what is a much more concentrated and profound conditioning format. The 20 and the 57. The 57 is attunement. Attunement. And of course, in attunement, what happens to you in the dream is that you are lost in the state. In other words, you realize that, if you could grasp it that way, you realize that you are in something that is you. In other words, you're attuned to the turmoil. It's not like, the astral plane where it can be so uncomfortable to be in a realm of turmoil. Here you have this perfect attunement to it. And most interesting is that it is about being able to navigate through things. To experience carrying the secret, to experience the possession, and yet to be able to move yourself to a place where you free yourself, which is awakeness, which is the end of the programming session. See, we get carried away with interpretation. We do. Because if you go back in human history, dreams have been used as auguries and omens, and they've been interpreted by wise men and priests and oracles, prophets. They are mentioned in so many religious texts. This one's dream and that one's dream. God came to me in a dream, and Harry came to me in a dream, and Louise came to me in a dream, and yeah. And then you see the not-self mind takes a little piece of information and turns it into a personal mythology. And you end up with a dream interpretation according to the collective unconscious. And we don't get to see individual programming. And we don't appreciate or get to appreciate why we have dream scenarios the way that we do. In the same way that to understand your design is to understand why you have the experiences you do in your life. To understand your dream mechanism is to begin to understand why you have the dreams you have, not what they're about. The only dreams that are really important, honestly, are the ones that take place on the earth plane. Because earth plane dreams, at least according to what I was told, earth plane dreams are intended to be shared. And obviously, and we'll talk about it when we get to the earth plane, that is either a limitation of the program, which seems likely to me, so that it has to be fulfilled through, the waking being. But being able to deal with what is commonly called the astral, and to recognize that the astral phenomena is very important to share because it is programmed by the waking human consciousness, that when you dream and you're rooted in the earth plane, you're actually dreaming for others. And in sharing your dreams, you actually can be of value to others, which is an interesting thing. So in that sense, those dreams actually have value. That is the kind of value that says, that I can release this dream as I experienced it, rather than what it is as a programming agency. But when you look at the light field or the demon realm, where you have the yin-yang competition for control of the destiny of humanity, because it really is like that in a way, then you cannot trust what you're getting as a dream surface. You can't. The programming is deeply hidden underneath. It's there to move you while you're in your conscious field. It's there to be a background in terms of the way in which it's moved through on your awakening, through your host system. That gives you all of this information in a very, very subtle way. It's very powerful. There's a lot of factors involved in this. Operating correctly according to your strategy, sleeping in your own aura, sleeping according or going to sleep according to what is correct for you, according to your type, and whether or not, as an example, you're a manifesting generator, which is a nuance on the process, so that your body is ready for its sleep state. Mondays are interesting now for me, because both of these programs, Quarter by Quarter and Night Forces, are demonstrations of the influence and pervasiveness of personality consciousness in distorting the waking mind. Distorting it. Because you see, these things don't leave us when we wake up. The memory, the dysfunctional, distorted memory of the little clip goes away, most likely. But the programming stays. And it's all part of the way in which our mental homogenized field is established. This is a mental homogenized field. It really is. You can tell that the deepest with the 8th gate. Because the 8th gate is darkness. Now you wouldn't associate darkness with the light, but then again there's no comparison. So, without darkness, what is light? Yet at the same time, that darkness is to frighten us. It's there to frighten us. It's there to condition us at a very deep level to look for the light. The promise of the covenant of the gods of the personality to bring you love, to bring you bliss, to bring you seeing, to bring you attunement, to defeat the forces of darkness and fill you with joy. Did that sound like propaganda or Sunday morning evangelical Baptist teachings? Or Muslim or whatever. Because that's what it is. I mean, this is the light field at work. This is the light field conditioning mind. And it's conditioning mind while mind is turned off. So it won't interfere. So it won't get in the way. That it'll just wake up with that bee in its bonnet. And the most powerful dreams you have, you do not remember. That's the spooky part. They're the ones that are going on day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. It's a program after all. And what does it lead to? All of this is supposed to lead to this expression of love. And so you have a waking world in which the personality is haunted by love. Haunted by it. Where is it? Do I have it? Can it be mine? What's the secret to love? Can I possess it? Love brings turmoil. Oh, love brings obsession. Or fantasy. Or vision. In the awake state, with all of this just moving through our body as chemical spurs, is what the mind feeds on. It feeds on it. We know the not-self mind, the distortion of the not-self mind. And you want to know how you can tell what this really is? It's here. Hey, this is a magic place. We have 3 circuits, and each circuit has this capacity, to reach out and go beyond. These are very special portals. We know them as cross-special connections. That is, the relationship between the mammal and a human. That there are 3 places where the mammal literally has potential, but it can only be fulfilled through a human. The 1762. This is all about organization. This is how the gods try to organize us while we're asleep. By giving us these drives. These drives, they're drives to keep our mind busy, to keep our minds lost, to keep our minds in the joke of being in control. When we are being organized, we are being organized for the future. This is what the program is doing. I have a lot of discussions about 2027, the advent of the mutation, the terminality of human fertility, the beginning of rave fertility. Most of that programming has been done while we're asleep. And there's no interference. And it's very primitive after all. It is a 15-gate matrix. It is mammalian. See, I don't think that any of this goes directly to the neocortex at all. It only really floods into the neocortex when one becomes awake. In that sense, it breaks the spell. This is all going into the mammalian brain. We have one, Neocortex, mammalian brain, reptilian brain. It goes into our mammalian brain. It goes into this denser level of the construct we're built upon, where the neocortex has added this lightness and awareness to us as a species. But we lose all that in the dream. We are the cow in the field, who in the daylight is manipulated in awakeness in the same way that we are manipulated as we sleep. Think about that. Grazing on, clouds. Isn't it funny, that cartoon image of insomniacs trying to get to sleep by counting sheep? That's us. It makes sense, no? You program them while they're asleep. They don't know any difference. And it's going on day after day after day after day. And then you have the whole world of nature that does not have a neocortex, that will never have a 17th gate, which is neocortex. This is this mammalian brain reaching out, this 62 reaching out saying, whoo, And we're just like nature when we're asleep. We are no longer capable of challenging it. We're docile, controlled. See, it's a limitation of the mammalian brain. We see it in the world around us. All of nature is blindly programmed. There is no resistance. There's no intellectual movement. There are no mystics and seers. They're just cows and sheep and rabbits and bears. And while we're asleep, we are just like that. And then, of course, because we are unaware, and because we had never had the mechanics, we try to make what the byproduct is of this programming some kind of unique and special phenomena. Give it importance. Because we need to understand it. Why do we sleep? Why do we dream? So we can be programmed. And dreaming, unfortunately, is just an indication of the limitation of the program, frankly. The remembrance of dreams doesn't really bring about the fulfillment of the purpose that the programming sets out. It doesn't. It simply absorbs the mind with what in fact may be, the thing that leads it into a decision that is truly incorrect for it. We are programmed differently by the different forces. The light field, the earth plane, the demon realm. There are different goals at work. We will see, for example, that the demon realm tries to maintain the well-being of our bodies. That in fact the demon realm, with all its, name reputation, is actually responsible for keeping us relatively healthy. Without that sleep, the rejuvenating imprint isn't going to be there. And the earth plane, where the consciousness field is regurgitated. There's some interesting tribes when it comes to dreaming. There's one tribe I know of that their morning ritual is that they all sit around and tell each other what they dreamed. This is earth plane dynamics. But we're here to understand the truth that is the mechanical truth, the mechanics of the Maya. When in the next semester I do the whole analytical program, I'll take you into the psychological versions, the story versions, and how those symbols relate back to the programming. But here you need to understand what we're dealing with. You need to strip it of, all that fascinating stuff, because it's there. And see that that's what fools us and tricks us. It's the way in which the program hides what it's doing, in a sense. And we need to see what's really being done. What's really being done. I can look at, my 5720, and I can see the positive of that. I can see that I am being programmed, stimulated in that sense. Being driven by fantasy and sight, it's there. The vision, the sight, all those things. The 57.5. And I can see that these things are there in me. My ability to, for example, to be able to attune to the shock of my encounter. I assumed that was all there in my dream preparation. Because I can see the underlying programming direction that's there. We are all instruments of the program, not simply victims of it. We are instruments of it. We are all programming each other. We are all conditioning each other. This is our world. We are being conditioned as we are awake. We are conditioned as we sleep. We are controlled in a homogenized world. This is the truth. We are in this vast, vast controlling mechanism. My discussion this morning, because it's so in line with this, because of course in working by quarter, I'm actually working with personality consciousness programming. And the theme that I discussed this morning, or the core of the theme, was the breaking of the covenant. In other words, no longer being controlled by the programming. Mentally. It's all right with me that I am programmed while I'm asleep. Hey, what to do? No choice, helplessness and incompetence. There is nothing I can do about it. However, when I am awake, my mind is not able to move me according to that programming. It can't. It has no authority in my life. I long ago broke my covenant with the gods. Long ago. Broke my covenant with the homogenized Godhead. With homogenized religions and homogenized concepts of this and that. Of love and friendship and partnership and all the things that are part of our lives. I do not trust any of it. I cannot. I know where it comes from. It comes from the not-self. I will never trust it. I do not trust the world. I do not trust the truths of the world. I do not. Cannot. It's a trap. There is only one authority. My authority. In my life. For me. Nothing else. My authority. And only then can you begin to accept the programming. It's not like it isn't a part of us. It is. But you can accept it in sleepness in the same way that you accept it in awakeness, choicelessly. without need for reason. But to be able to take your ticket as a passenger and punch in and watch. When I first began to teach Dream Rave was the first time that I got into it myself, to explore it and watch it. And as I said, for me it's I don't get to capture it in my dreaming because I don't have a lot of dreams that I remember. But I got to see it in my waking life. I got to see it. It's interesting. You can see it. You can see how your dream program impacts you when you're awake. In fact, it begins to lose its power that way. The propaganda is that we need the dreams because without them we will not know. We will not get the secrets and blah, blah, blah. The vision won't be there. The fantasy that leads to miracle. The obsession that is just and holy and perfect. The turmoil that leads to creativity. The possession that is so perfect that it is not possession. We're such suckers, We're so easily manipulated. And it's all mind. Mind. It's all mind. Nothing else. The beauty of what we do, that we take authority away from the mind. You take authority away from the mind, you're not going to be deluded anymore. You're not. And you see, there is only one great drama. It's your own. It's your own. It is the ultimate entertainment, a lifelong entertainment of watching your movie. Just watching it. Yes, things happen. There are many of these configurations where really incredible things happen. Visions that realize and all kinds of stuff, secrets that emerge and blah, 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 and on and on and on and on. Yeah, that's true. But it happens more often in the waking life. It's only more dramatic in the dreaming life because one doesn't really have a sense of how one got to that and why it happened and how mysterious it all is. See, the wool has been taken away from my eyes a long time ago. I do not bend my knee to propaganda. This is all propaganda. It's a control system. And quite frankly, it doesn't care about us anymore. It's just pushing ahead with its own agenda. Yeah. Anyway, I don't mean to deflate anybody's excitement about dream analysis. But like everything having to do with human design. And first you have to see the facts. You need to deconstruct and break down the mythologies and the illusions. And just see the mechanism. And once you learn the mechanism, once you grasp the mechanism, yes, then you can move back upwards to the surface and see the way the movie plays out and develop a language for being able to understand that relative to the being and their life. But first you have to see it for what it is. It's a programming tool. And it's us that's being programmed. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. And wherever you are, morning, noon, or night, you have yourself an entertaining day. And start looking. If you're a light field person, look at your lines, look at your gates. Don't pay any attention to your dreams. Pay attention to your mind when you're awake the next day. That's interesting. Okay, folks. Bye for now.